What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of The Drop here on ESPN. Greg Wyshynski, Arda Ocal, thank you very much for joining us every Thursday on the ESPN NHL YouTube channel. We are in the shadow of All-Star, less than a month away. The fan vote is going on, and for that exact reason, we have a very special guest, someone that Wish knows very, very well, and that is John Scott. I can't wait for this conversation, Wish. It's going to be great.
The man whose life I ruined will be on the show today. First time John and I will have sat down, even virtually, to discuss what happened. For those that don't know, when I was on a podcast called Merrick versus Wyshynski, we had a campaign to get John Scott into the All-Star Game. And it was because he was a guy that fought people and a guy that wasn't really all good at hockey skills in our minds. It was kind of a joke, but then it kind of took on a life of its own. It became a whole thing about like fans wanted to see a guy that would never be an all-star in the All-Star Game. It was a moment to kind of celebrate the role that he played in the NHL. And then more than anything, Arda, it became a moment in which his team, the league, and everybody else started to fight back to try to prevent it from happening, which only encouraged fans to back the campaign even more. It was an amazing moment, a successful moment. I mean, John was the MVP of the game. The ratings were huge, and he's obviously, after hockey, crafted a nice career for himself. But we're going to talk about some real interesting things with John Scott on this show this week.
And the story has generated Hollywood interest. Need we say more? So that's a little bit later. Why don't we start? We're about at the halfway mark of the NHL season now in 2022-2023. Why don't we dole out some midseason awards? Now, I'm pretty sure when we're talking team of the year, the Boston Bruins are clearly the team of the year so far. So here's how I'm going to phrase it, Wish. Who is the team of the year in the NHL not named the Boston Bruins?
Well, I want to give a little love to the Dallas Stars. Now, there's some other better stories. I think you're going to talk about one in a second in the NHL this season. But the Dallas Stars sitting atop the Western Conference, the Pete DeBoer effect, what he does in his first year with the team in full effect. Jason Robertson, a superstar, having a superstar year. I mean, all eyes on him as a potential MVP threat to Mr. McDavid, as we mentioned earlier. Jake Ottinger, hey, guess what? That performance we saw in the playoffs, expect more. He's been fantastic for Dallas as well. Great balanced lineup, getting contributions all over the place. Not the greatest 5-on-5 team in the world, Arda, but getting results where it counts, which is in the standings. And I've been really impressed with how Dallas has played in the first half of the season, even if they're not the Boston Bruins.
How dare you break vodcast kayfabe and tell everybody that we prepare for these shows and already have our answers in advance? How could you do that, man? Come on. The sanctity of the secrets of show creation.
Hey, listen, buddy, it's not been a huge week for kayfabe, I think, in the industry.
Who knew that the biggest story in sports and entertainment involving McMahon would be the Toronto Maple Leafs saying that Austin Matthews is out and Bobby McMahon is in? Anyway, the team that I'm going to select, as you alluded to, the New Jersey Devils, Greg Wyshynski's New Jersey Devils. I know that there's some recency bias here. Oh, they had a horrible December. They were far and away the leaders in the Metro. And then all of a sudden, here come the Hurricanes and the Devils go on a schneid. And that's going to populate our thoughts like toxic trolls on the internet. But to me, the fact that if you look at where the Devils are this year compared to last year on January 13th, they had 33 points. Right now, they have 55. That's a 22-point improvement from last season. They're still second in the Metro. They're still well on pace to make the playoffs, which in itself for this New Jersey Devils team, even if you look at the last 10 years of their existence, is definitely a win, definitely an improvement. So for that reason, and especially that win streak that they were on to start the season, I think that there's enough evidence there to give them strong consideration for team of the year, not named the Boston Bruins.
Plus, they're fun as hell. Like, I mean,
they're fun as hell.
They play with pace. They play with tenacity. They play with personality. Jack Hughes has transformed himself into one of the most entertaining players on the planet. I do want to give a shout out to two other teams. The Winnipeg Jets, who are chasing the Dallas Stars right now. I don't think any of us expected them to be this good. Even if you expected a little bump up in the standings because Connor Hellebuck is better, I don't think anybody expected the Rick bonus effect to be as good as it is, making Josh Morrissey a Norris contender and all that stuff.
How
And then
good
the
has he been,
Seattle,
right? Oh,
yeah,
man.
and then the Seattle Kraken were the other team I wanted to mention too. I mean, we put some love on the Devils, who are right now on pace for around a 41 point increase year over year in the standings points wise, which is incredible. Seattle might be even better. Like Seattle has a chance to have even a larger point increase year over year than the Devils, based on the balance of their offense, based on the data-driven approach to team building that's paid off this season, and based on, I mean, Martin Jones ain't going to win the Vezina, but he also ain't going to give up a goal 2 minutes after they score one, which was a real problem last year. So shout out to the Kraken for their first half.
This is the season that everyone comparing them to Vegas thought they were going to have last season, right?
Yeah.
How about, player of the year? Connor McDavid is absolutely on fire. I mean, he's still on pace for 50 goals in 50 games. It's entirely possible. He could still get to 150 plus points on the campaign, right? Mm-hmm. Player of the year not named Connor McDavid is...
Player of the year not named Connor McDavid is Tage Thompson, man. Remember that night we were all watching Tage Thompson score 4 goals in the first period? We're like, he's going to assault the record book. He's going to set the record for most goals in a game by a single player. It didn't happen. He still ended up with 5 goals for the game. But that's been the kind of season he's had. I mean, he has not gone more than 2 games without a point this season for the Buffalo Sabres. He's led their resurgence back to being close to the playoff bubble this year. We are renaming formally the Ryan O'Reilly trade to the Tage Thompson trade. The dude is going to have put together 2 remarkable offensive seasons. He's 6'7". It's like watching a Mario adjacent player out there for the Sabres. He's a franchise guy, and I don't think anybody really thought that was going to be the case 3 years ago. So Tage Thompson, along with Hughes, along with Robertson, along with Pasternak, maybe in that pack of players that could unseat Connor McDavid for MVP, although it's not likely.
I'm still salty about that game, by the way. I think Tage played like 4 minutes or 3 minutes in that third period. Like, just leave him on. Jack Hughes had a 6.5 minute shift in a game this season. Like, just leave him on the ice. Let him break the record. I don't know. Erik Karlsson leads defenseman in goals and points. It's just incredible. It's always been there. This is more of a Jay-Z allow me to reintroduce myself kind of situation, right? Like, we all knew that Erik Karlsson is amazing, but just this year, what he's been able to produce, maybe it's the fact that he has more freedom offensively, no reliance on Brent Burns, and maybe he's eating the lion's share of that. Whatever the case may be, it's just Erik Karlsson is absolutely clicking. And what makes it more impressive is it's happening on a Sharks team that really should be thinking about Connor Bedard more than Erik Karlsson. And here he is just absolutely lighting it up.
I wrote about this in my column this week about how, which you could read, by the way, on ESPN.com, dealing with a lot of the mid-season superlatives. Erik Karlsson is thriving offensively, Arda, because he has stopped pretending to care about defense. All due respect to Erik Karlsson. Erik Karlsson is now Al Pacino performances after 1992, where if you're coming for nuance, you ain't getting nuance, man. If you're coming for defense, you ain't getting defense, man. But you are getting offense, and a guy that could easily eclipse 100 points for the first time since Brian Leach did so back in the early 90s. So I'm all about it. Hoo-ah! I'm all about it. Erik Karlsson as the post-92 Al Pacino of the NHL.
And who's not going to love an Al Pacino performance in any era? So whatever.
That's correct. Exactly.
I don't have a team or a player associated with this, so we'll just fill in the blanks. Who is so far the biggest disappointment in the first half of the season?
I'm going Vancouver Canucks only because there are teams that are behind them in the standings. That is true. But there are teams that were designed to be terrible. The Canucks re-signed Brock Besser. They re-signed JT Miller. They were designed to be good. They're not good. They're bad. They're in that kind of murky middle that a lot of teams are inhabiting this season. But on top of that, they're so messy. They're like Real Housewives level messy off the ice, whether it's the Jim Rutherford, Bruce Boudreau schism philosophically, or JT Miller talking about his comportment, or the Bo Horvat future and what they're going to do with him, or fans chanting, sell the team to Aquilini. Like, they're just a messy soap operatic team off the ice. You combine that with not winning on the ice, and they are the biggest disappointment of the season.
I'm going to take a cue from JT Miller. Whenever I need you to wrap up a segment, I'm just going to start yelling at you. I'm just going to be like, wrap it up. Come on, go home and just do this. So that you get the Ottawa Senators was my pick.
Oh, yeah.
In the offseason, a lot of people saw their stock rise exponentially with their pickups, right? Like, look no further than Giroux and DeBrincat and Talbot. But it just hasn't been clicking necessarily. The biggest news to come out of Ottawa is Ryan Reynolds possibly buying the team and Cam Talbot putting Deadpool on his goalie mask.
That's
right?
True. Yeah,
so,
it's a great sign for us, but not a good sign for them if that's the best story of the year so far.
We got puck headlines coming up in a bit, but first, the 2016 NHL All-Star MVP. Very pleased to be joined here on The Drop on ESPN by 2016 NHL All-Star MVP, John Scott. He's a podcaster now. He's all over the Twitter sphere, the hockey media bubble, and he's joining us right now. John, first of all, thanks for being here and taking time out for us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Obviously, the big topic of conversation is that the All-Star Game has returned to the fan vote portion. And of course, I'm sure that brought back a lot of memories. Obviously, we're going to reminisce about 2016 with Wish here and all, but I'd love to get your reaction. What was your first thought when you saw that the NHL was bringing back the fan vote in 2023?
I just assume that viewership has been down, honestly. So that was my first thought. I said, okay, they need to drum up some kind of interest. So let's bring back the fan vote, because it was a popular thing. It kind of spawned me and that whole movement. And that's why they brought it back. That was my first thought.
Yeah, it was a very popular thing until we ruined it. Apparently, it was the problem. John, the thing that I thought about was not only did they bring back the fan vote, but then they installed the John Scott rules to make sure that you could.
It's pretty funny.
Again. Isn't that funny? Like, it's not hyperbole to say that the John Scott rules, because literally every bylaw they added to the voting addressed something that happened to you. The minor league thing, the trade at a certain time thing. Like, it was all based on your candidacy for the All-Star Game.
Which is flattering in a way, because they do obviously think that the fans would rally behind me or someone like me who maybe isn't even in the league. Because I think even a rule is have to be an NHL eligible player. You have to be playing hockey. But Gary still has a small piece of room in his heart for me there. So it's nice. I don't know. It's enjoyable.
I was thinking back to when we pulled off that gambit on the Merrick versus Wyshynski podcast of putting you out as the candidate. And, part of it, obviously, we'll get into was about who you were at that point in your career. But also part of it was just like they had done everything they could at that with the All-Star Game to minimize the fan vote. I think at that point, it was like you were voting for 4 people. And the rest of the team, the NHL, was kind of installing. And that was a reaction to the time when hockey fans tried to get Rory Fitzpatrick in the All-Star Game. Yep. And everybody was a little bit suspicious that the NHL might have played around with the numbers behind the scenes. So even when you got put into the All-Star Game, it was at a time when the fan vote had been sort of minimized. So it is kind of remarkable that they're bringing it back. They're not releasing the totals, I don't think, but they are bringing it back. Which
doesn't just add another layer of suspicion. Why wouldn't you want to be totally transparent and just say, okay, every day, here's the totals? But there's always some layer of secrecy with the NHL that people just don't trust. And I don't know why. They just don't. Completely transparent. Go for it.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I was watching this along as a fan, and it was glorious. I just loved the whole story of you showing up at the All-Star Game, the fan and the players and the fans embracing it. Like I still remember, I think it was a Brent Burns tweet where he's like tweeting beside the All-Star logo, and he's like, "I'm ready for duty, Captain." Like he's like saying, "I'm ready to go," and whatever. I just like can you just tell us a little bit about, from the players' perspective, being in the locker room, all the players, your teammates, your opponents at the All-Star game, like how much did they embrace this whole thing?
Well, I had a different experience, I think, than anybody has ever had, because when you go to the All-Star game, typically you're excited. It's a very relaxed environment. You just go and have fun. I was under an immense amount of pressure to not embarrass myself and to just kind of validate myself as a hockey player, because everybody expected me to fail. So it was strange. And going into that room, I didn't know what to expect, right? Because I was taking someone's spot, Shane Doan or some Hall of Famer who could have been there, some all-star who had the stats and the numbers. And the guys in the room could have been better. Like you said, Burnsy, Pavs were on the team, Drew Doughty, Jonathan Quick, those guys, they just great guys, came out, made me feel at home. And I knew all of them from playing against them and battling with them, but it was nice to get that kind of reception in that room, because man, I was so incredibly nervous. It was unbelievable, the goosebumps and the nerves that I was feeling going into that room, more so than any other NHL game that I had played in a long time before that point. Yeah, it was wild.
I knew for a while you hated what was going on. You thought I was a piece of crap. I'm kind of actually happy that I'm not within punching distance right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, this is the first time we've talked since 2016, to be honest. I think we ran into each other in an elevator.
Sort of like Sportsnet thing at some point, but you might be right. This might be the first time that
Whoa,
you and I
wait a minute. Seriously? This is the first time?
Yeah.
I think I rode in an elevator with you.
You did.
And I think I called you a jerk or something.
You called me a jerk. It was like an elevator in the middle of a hotel.
Yeah.
And I was a little nervous. I was going to be thrown through the glass. And
I almost threw you through the glass. Yeah. And this is the first time we've talked to each other. And it's all water under the bridge. But at I was heated. I did not enjoy that whole situation leading up to the game. So
we put you in a spot. And one of for those who don't know, the podcast Radio Lab did a really good episode with me and John a few years ago, and I was listening to it in preparation for this interview. And one thing I always wanted to ask you about the situation was, you hated me, you hated the situation going on, you didn't like the things that were happening, what were being said about you as a guy, as a player, and I know that the NHL's interference in this, with asking you what your kids thought of it and what your dad thought of it and all that stuff, I know that really set you off. But I didn't realize that even before that, the Coyotes had kind of asked you to sign off on a statement saying, "Don't put me in the All-Star game. I'm not into it." Was that the first moment that things started to turn for you a little bit in thinking about this candidacy a little differently?
Yeah, it was, I think, because the whole voting process was a month, I believe.
Yeah.
And after the first week, I was approached by the Coyotes to release a statement. They drafted a statement for me.
Yeah.
And it basically said, "I don't want to take votes away from my teammates. Please stop voting for me. I appreciate the support." And so I chewed on it and I edited it just a little bit. I said, "If you want to vote for me, please vote for my teammates as well." Because it just didn't sit well with me that they I can't get any votes. I'm not an NHL player. But yeah, they drafted that. They released that. And then I would say every 4 days we would have a little sit down with the Coyotes higher ups. And they would just try to not so subtly get me to drop out of the game, offering me things, this and that, saying, "Well, what the NHL wants to do this for you. How can we get you to not play in this game?" Money, trips, vacations, those sorts of things, to the point where they were going to offer me a share of the winnings, vacation anywhere in the world with my family, and a trip to Nashville to be a part of the All-Star festivities, as long as I don't play. Huh. And it just kept making me more and more angry. It's like, I've been in the NHL for 7-8 years now. Like I do kind of know how to skate, you guys. Like, I know I punch people for a living, but I do, I practice with these guys all the time. I do know I can keep up. So it just was annoying. But yeah, it was an interesting month of just almost negotiations. It was wild.
I have two questions. Sorry, Wish. I have to follow up on this because I had no idea that this was the first time that you two were really sitting down, so to speak. So yeah. I'd love to know, at what point did it turn for you? So it went from, I don't want to be a part of this, And how dare you single me out? It's almost offensive to, you know what? I'm kind of embracing this now. Do you remember the exact moment that happened?
It was after the call with one of the very higher ups in the NHL who questioned my intentions and if my family and dad would be proud. I had a real kind of come to Jesus moment with my wife, and she's like, these people don't have your best interest at heart. They want what's bad for you. And that was like 2 weeks out of the games, kind of halfway through the process. And then I got support from my wife. I leaned on her, and then I got a ton of players coming out of the woodworks, former, current players saying, screw this, man. Like, you should go. Former tough guys, current tough guys, skill guys, all throughout the league, people I used to play with. And that was really the turning point, because you feel like a joke, right? You have Greg and Jeff starting this whole kind of campaign, and everybody thinks it's a big joke, and you're just, the butt of it. And it's funny, but then it becomes, you second guess yourself, and then you get people kind of rallying behind you. So yeah, about halfway through, I think I kind of turned it into a good thing. It's like, okay, let's go. We'll go to the All-Star game. It'll be fun. I'll bring the family, and we'll make the best of it. So it was a tough transition, I'll be honest.
Yeah. One of the things I was always curious about with you is like Arda and me and everybody that's kind of following along with the NHL part of this. We're kind of kicking around some conspiracy theories in our heads about you getting traded and then you get demoted. I mean, were you thinking that there were forces that play beyond simply a transaction between Arizona and Montreal to make that happen at that point?
Well, I know things happen just based on talking to the GMs of those teams, Mark Bergevin and Don Maloney. Talking to those two guys, I straight up asked them why I was traded, and one of them said it was out of my hands. So,
wow.
Yeah. And
wow,
it is what it is. It walks like a duck, talks like it's a duck. Like, you don't get traded from the Arizona Coyotes as a fourth line tough guy in the middle of the season where we're having a successful season to the Canadians. Like, it just doesn't happen. There's not trades like that. So, it is. The fix was in. It just, they didn't want me to go, and that's fine. I get it, but it worked out, in the end of the day. But it just, to go to that extent, it's just wild to me. It just makes them look so bad. I don't know how they can't read the room. I know it's 6 years past and hindsight's 2020, but boy, just let it go. If I fall flat on my face, they can go, see, I told you. That's why we didn't want this. Don't let it happen again. This guy made a fool of himself. Or if it's a hit, then we say, okay, let's keep this ball rolling.
I mean, obviously, like, we probably laid it on a little too thick with the criticism of your skill set. I mean, you're an NHL player. You got to the show. Like, just in talking to guys through the years, to play in the NHL and to stay in the NHL as you did, there's other guys that did your job that couldn't stay in the NHL, with their fists. Exactly. But you were able to hang. You were able to play. And we probably discounted that more than we should, maybe for effect.
Yeah.
But the one thing I always wanted to kind of make clear is that, I grew up in the 80s and 90s as a fan of a different league, a league that had fighting. At one point in my life, my favorite player was Troy Crowder, because he used to have fights with Probert all the time, right? And so part of this was always like, get a guy in that spotlight that would highlight that type of player. And it just turned out to be like, you went to the All-Star game at a time when fighting in hockey was already on the decline. You might have been the last enforcer. I mean, maybe Brian Reeves is the other guy. And it also had a twinge of that, I thought, at the All-Star game. On top of the celebration of this underdog story, it was also a recognition, especially from a lot of your peers, of that job that you did and how important and how meaningful it was to a lot of the players.
Well, what were you expecting to happen? Be honest.
Be honest? So it's the All-Star game, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know what was going to happen in skills.
First 3-on-3 one too.
Yeah,
First
I figured you were
3-on-3
going to be in hardest shot. I didn't know about anything else. But being that it's the All-Star game, and being that it's 3-on-3, and being that it is, although fast, still kind of like a 1/3 speed competition, I thought you'd be all right. I thought that the guys on your team would protect you and would give you opportunities to shine. I didn't think you'd embarrass yourself in the game. I thought you might embarrass yourself in skills, depending on what they did. But
I have a funny story about that.
Okay in the game. I thought you'd be okay in the game. I didn't think that you'd have a Disney movie happen in the game like you did, you know. But I thought being that it was the All-Star game, there'd probably be ways to kind of let you shine, and that the boys wouldn't let you look embarrassed out there.
John, what was the story you were going to say?
So the way it works with the All-Star game is the two captains vote for the events. They get to select where the people go. So me and Patty Kane, right when we got into Nashville, we met in a conference room. All the NHL people were there, and we got to put people in places. And obviously they wanted certain people to do the fastest skater and this and that. Well, I was already the butt of the joke at that point. So I wanted to do the fastest skater, the skills competition, and everything. So I put people in different positions. Like I put Dylan Larkin in the hardest shot. I put Patrick Kane in the hardest shot. I put Dustin Byfuglien in the fastest skater. I put myself in the fastest skater in accuracy because Ray Bourque's my idol. I want to be like him. And they just didn't do anything I wanted. So like I didn't put Shea Weber in the hardest shot. I just wanted to mix it right up and have some fun with it. But yeah, they completely threw out all my recommendations and just went whatever they wanted to. But it was funny. I had Kaner and all these guys in hardest shot. It would have been great. It would have been fun.
An agent of chaos. That's
yeah, but
that thing, man.
Nobody likes fun anymore. So.
On a year of chaos, which is amazing.
There you go.
All right, you have anything else to ask him about the game? Because I want to ask him about the aftermath of the game, Arda.
I loved the Patrick Kane John Scott fight after that goal. I thought that was hilarious. It's one of the highlights. Were you expecting that?
No, not at all. I thought I should have scored on the breakaway, but I just threw it right in his chest. I did a typical goon move and threw it right in his chest and didn't score. But yeah, it was fun. Kaner's a good dude, and we just I did not expect him coming after me though. It would have been, how good would it have been if I would have just straight down the middle and laid him out?
Yeah. I guess I got one more about the game, which is what happened at the end. I mean, people probably remember that the last gasp of the NHL in this controversy was not listing you amongst the MVP finalists for the All-Star game.
Again,
when the crowd is behind you and everybody's watching. I mean, again, you go back to what you said before about, you know, is it going to be a flop or is it going to be a success? The ratings were incredible for that game. Like they were at a multi-year high for your participation in that game. Then they leave you off the MVP ballot. And then the fans like write you in basically to win MVP. What was that moment like for you? Were you cognizant of any of that while it was going on?
Well, you hear the fans chanting your name in the stadium, but you don't think that's going to translate to votes. You know, I didn't think I was in the running at all because I think it was Taylor, Hall, and a couple other guys. But I didn't even hear my name when he announced it because I was sitting on the blue line, and you can't hear at ice level what the announcers are announcing very well. So, the place erupted, and I just went up and got the keys and stuff. But yeah, it was again just overwhelming. The support and just the lack of awareness by the NHL is astounding, even to the bitter end. But yeah, it was just fairy tale ending all around.
All right. Speaking of fairy tale endings, in the time since the All-Star game, a script has been written of this moment in your life. I think Mitch Albom wrote it, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And did you get a chance to read the script?
Yeah, there's been a few iterations of the script. It's a good script. Yeah, I like it.
How am I in the script? Did they put me in the script?
You're in there. Oh, and I had to say, but no, it's pretty close to what happened and how the story begins, and you're definitely in there. So it's.
Well, I'll have to reach out to Patton Oswalt's agent and let him know there may be a part in his future.
You look like
the thing, but what I wanted to ask you is that incredibly, this came out a couple weeks ago. Hugh Jackman was going to play John Scott in the John Scott story. Is this accurate?
And he still might. You know, the schedules are always moving with actors, and we're still trying to nail down. Like we have a director, we have, a lot of the foundation stuff in place. So you never know. But yeah, huge. It's Wolverine. It's pretty cool.
If you don't mind me asking, and you can decline if you'd like, when you told your wife that Hugh Jackman might play you in a movie. What was the reaction?
The most beautiful thing is she could care less. I don't know how your wife is. She doesn't care. She didn't care about my hockey career, really. She just wants me to be a normal guy who just, goes to work and comes home. So she's just like, that's great, Hugh Jackman. Okay, can you change this kid's diaper? Like, let's move on. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
I know that feeling, John. I know that feeling. All I'm going to say about that is that if Hugh Jackman actually does sign in to be in this film, Greg, there's no way Ryan Reynolds is playing you, bud. I'm just saying.
I don't think so, man.
There's not a chance, dude.
There's not enough makeup to make him that ugly.
Hey, John, why don't we focus on 2023? I know that you still love the game, cover the game, talk about it on a weekly basis. So as it pertains to the 2023 All-Star Game, who are John Scott's 3 All-Stars?
Well, the vote in is tricky. I got to go with the guy I have a lot of history with, Phil Kessel. I think he would be fun just because he's a skill guy. I love the way he plays the game, and he deserves to be there. And a guy who's been in the league for, and Greg prompted me these questions, so I'm not just off the top of my head. So I did a little research. Craig Anderson.
I love
for
that.
20 years, 41 years old, never made an All-Star game, having a great year with Buffalo. I think that would be a great pick. A very good resurgent Sabres team. I know he's not the starter, but he's played well this year. So I think he would be nice. And then to kind of maybe mix in a fighter, Arbor Shea from Montreal, I think he would be good. He's fun. He's putting up some points. The Montreal fan base seems to like him. And I don't know, no offense, much good that's coming from the Canadians this time of year. So he might be a good pick. Or another guy like a Pierre-Edouard Bellemare from Tampa Bay, been around a long time. So I like the older guys. Shine a little light on them. But Craig Anderson would be my
Craig Anderson pick is so good, man. Like that's a guy who basically was seemingly retired after he played with the Capitals, came back, plays for Buffalo, plays behind that defense last year, comes back again, and then ends up being a pretty integral part of what they're building there. So that's a great pick, man. I think Craig Anderson would be amazing in the All-Star game.
Well, thank you.
But Phil Kessel can't miss a game, right? Like he's the Iron Man. We can't have him miss the All-Star game on account of the Iron Man streak.
Probably the best All-Star moment is him sitting there knowing he's going to be picked last for the just like so
with
red.
Ovechkin taking the pictures and the whole thing.
It's so funny.
I guess finally now with the benefit of hindsight, I mean, your life changed pretty significantly in a lot of different ways by this moment. I mean, what is your takeaway 6 years later or whatever it's been?
Well, grateful, obviously. And it's funny how it comes full circle. Grateful for you for starting this whole journey, because I wouldn't have my old podcast. I wouldn't have, a movie. I wouldn't be on this show with you right now. So just really grateful for everything that happened, and just happy to be here. Honestly, I was very fortunate to play in the show, and now I can still talk about hockey. So, I 7 kids, beautiful wife, lucky guy. So there you go.
That's a whole other podcast, John. What's it like to raise 7 kids? That's wow. Okay. I have 2 and I'm struggling. 7 is incredible.
2
John,
and 7 are the same. So
yeah, sure. Yeah, that sounds about right. We are grateful that you gave us so much of your time here to talk and reminisce about one of the biggest moments of your career here on The Drop on ESPN. John, thanks for your time, man. This was fun.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to John Scott for joining us here on The Drop. That was an excellent conversation. I'm sure that he's going to be doing a lot of media leading up to the All-Star Game, especially with the fan vote involved. I hope that you two are in person at some point. Like I hope that I hope he shows up to All-Star and you're there and there's another elevator happenstance meeting.
Dude, he said the sweetest thing at the end, man. There's a lot of people on the internet who still believe that me and Jeff Merrick ruined this man's life, and it was very sweet for him to kind of exonerate us of our sins, I suppose, at the end. That said, I'm still double locking my doors tonight. All right, I'm just saying.
Last thing, if there's 2 people that really need to do that TikTok meme from Zoolander where Ben Stiller and Luke Wilson bump into each other. Excuse me, brah, you're not my brah. It's you and John Scott. Like, we need to do that and put it on the NHL's TikTok. That would be the excellent ending to the entire story.
Perfect.
Puck headlines. Dateline, Connor McDavid's feet. Bet you thought we would never say that on this show. Never thought I would. But an image has been circulating the social media, the interwebs, of the socks that Connor McDavid apparently has worn for over 500 games in the NHL since he started in the National Hockey League. This is the one singular pair of socks, allegedly, that he has worn. They are tattered. They are bruised. They are literally hanging by a thread.
Yeah.
But what is not surprising, Wish, is that a hockey player has a superstition.
And also not surprising that Connor McDavid is a dude and would have socks that look like that. We all have socks that look like that. My lucky pair of socks got little teddy bears on them. They kind of look like that. I've worn them to the studio when we've done the show in Bristol. Superstitions for hockey players, awesome. And usually it's goalies, but I'm going to go, my favorite of all time, I think, I'm going to go with Wayne Gretzky. Now, Wayne Gretzky, quite a successful player, in case you haven't heard. His liquid intake was always fascinating to me. Between periods, Wayne Gretzky would drink a Diet Coke, okay? Then he would follow it with ice water, and then he would follow it with Gatorade, and then maybe another Diet Coke. And this would become a ritualistic thing for the best player on the entire planet. And I don't know about you, Arda, but like 2 Diet Cokes for me between periods, probably not going to score as many points as Wayne Gretzky did, despite them being Diet Cokes. But that intake was always fascinating to me.
Maybe there's a molecular composition there with the Gatorade infused and maybe the hydration that maybe it just ups your game. It's just like a serum. Who knows? It worked for Wayne Gretzky.
Super soldier serum is 2 Diet Cokes, a Gatorade, and ice water. That's cracked the code.
And then he brings Michael Jordan and Bo Jackson back together to create Pro Stars, and they make a whole thing out of it. Mine is Patrick Waugh talking to his posts. I know a lot of goaltenders have done this. I just love that he really leaned into it, especially in his early years in the NHL. Like in the 80s, they asked him about it, and he's like, yeah, it just started on a night in Hartford by accident, and I just didn't stop talking to my posts. And he's like, and they were like, well, what do you say to them? And he's like, oh, I just say, help me out here tonight. And the best response was, sometimes they talk back. They go bing. I'm like, perfect. Dateline trade market. It is quiet, Greg Wyshynski. Now, granted, it's still the beginning of the year. It's January 11th, but we're not that far off from NHL trade deadline. So the fact that we haven't even heard necessarily big rumors or juicy morsels that we can really chomp into on shows like these on our show, maybe a little concerning, maybe not. What do you think? If you were to pick a team that is going to just buck the trend and say, no, we're going to make the first big move as we approach the trade deadline, which team would you choose?
Well, we've got some contenders that could use some help, Colorado being one of them, although I'm sure they view their injured players more as reinforcements than going out and getting that second line center that they need. But I think it's going to take the sellers to really get this thing going. And what I'm looking at is the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, they do have some veteran guys, most of them on 2-year contracts, so that does complicate things. But Montreal's just not bad enough. Like they have a higher percentage of potentially making the playoffs than teams like the Coyotes and the Blackhawks. And when you're talking about getting a Connor Bedard, you've got to be as bad as you possibly can be. So throw some stuff overboard, get as light as you can get. Trade your Hoffmans, trade your Edmondsons, figure out what to do there, and then kind of move forward with it. But honestly, Artie, you bring up the trade market. It's a little frustrating, to be honest, that we're not even, like you said, getting juicy trade rumors at this point. And this is now a multi-year trend. Last season, we didn't really have a significant trade in the first half of the season either, outside of the Jack Eichel move, which was necessitated for reasons beyond the usual transaction reasons. So this might just be how it is because of the cap being where it is, because teams, because of parity, teams feeling like they're in the hunt, maybe if they're even not supposed to be. This might just be how it is for the first 3 months of the season.
You mentioned one of the teams that I would pick, the Blackhawks. I would say they're in that conversation of sellers needing to make a move. I guess the big question there is, will it be Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves. Will they agree to move? Do they want to move? Can the Blackhawks get it done? I think that's going to be intriguing leading up to trade deadline. But remember, they also have other pieces, right? Max Domi, Andreas Athanasiou, like whoever it might be. It doesn't feel like many players on that team are untouchable. And so
the ultimate caveat is whether Patrick Kane's healthy enough to move. There's been sort of this theory put out by our friend Elliot Friedman at Sportsnet that maybe they extend Kane for a year in Chicago, get him healthy, and then try to move him next year. Oh, and by the way, maybe he ends up playing a little wing for Connor Bedard as well.
Right. And that, like, exactly. I should have mentioned that's a big, asterisk. So, we're going to be monitoring that and whatever may come of that. But certainly there are other pieces with the Chicago Blackhawks in terms of what might be traded and other teams that are in that Connor Bedard conversation. That does it for us here on The Drop. Thank you very much for watching. Leafs and Wings on ESPN Thursday night. Devils and Ducks, ESPN Plus Friday. I'll be in studio for that. And it'll be fun. What can we look forward to from you in the next few days, Wish?
Got midseason awards, man, on the site right now, kind of superlatives, talking about the best and worst, disappointments and triumphs and controversies, a little bit of discussion about those digital board ads. And then obviously more fun and games on the ESPN digital side, as we do every day for your entertainment.
Absolutely. On that note, goodbye, and we will see you next week.
Take care.